All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about what America really wants in this war. America wants this war to last as long as it can so that the Germans can have an incentive to become a military power in Europe again. So that America can look at Germany and say, okay, you guys are fine. You guys have your military up. You guys are a military power again. Okay, you guys are now the check against the Russians. You guys are now going to deal with the Russians for us. That way, we can invest more time on dealing with the Chinese. And in dealing with the Chinese, the Americans are going to help boost the Japanese, make the Japanese a power again in Asia, a serious military force in Asia, so that the Americans can look at the Japanese and say, okay, you guys are a military power again. All right, you guys take care of the Chinese. It's the same thing with Turkey. The Americans want the Turks to become a power again so that they can look at the Turks and say, okay, you guys are strong enough. All right, you deal with the Russians in the Black Sea. You are now the military power that we want in the Black Sea. Deal with the Russians. So Turkey, you're strong enough. Germany, you're strong enough. Japan, you're strong enough. Okay, now to hell with the whole world. And America wants to isolate itself and just watch the whole world while it sits back and relaxes. And from just looking at the news, that's what it looks like to me. That's what it looks like to me as far as what America wants to do. Because I've been reading the news and I've been reading how the Germans are focusing more on themselves as opposed to Europe, how the French were talking about having shared borrowing for helping EU citizens pay for their electric bills, and the Germans said, no, we're just going to have a $200 billion or 200 billion euro package so that we can help our own citizens pay for their electric bills and deal with this energy uncertainty problem that we're facing. And the French didn't like that. And what the French were asking for, which was shared borrowing for dealing with energy insecurity, that is what the Southern Europeans wanted. That's what the Mediterranean European countries wanted. The Italians, etc., the Spaniards. That's the type of policy that they want. What the Germans did is pretty much what the Northern Europeans want. They don't want to help poor European countries. They don't want to help countries that are in debt. They want to help their own people. They want to spend money on themselves as opposed to poor European countries. It's kind of like people in America complaining about welfare. We don't want to help those poor people over there because they're irresponsible. We are more responsible people, and that's how the Germanic countries see themselves. They see themselves as being more responsible, more efficient, and they see the Southerners as irresponsible and incompetent. And so the Germans are representing the interest of the Germanic Europeans, and the French are representing more so the interest of the Southern Europeans. There was an article that came out years ago, back in 2016, I believe. It was published by Stratfor, which is a think tank that focuses on geopolitics. Basically, this article said something to the likes of, in the future, it's possible that the EU could just split up and the French could lead essentially a coalition of Mediterranean European countries. And there was a member of the AFD years ago who said, us Germans, we have much more in common culturally with Austrians and Dutch as opposed to those Southerners, which are less fiscally responsible. So there's definitely this rift that's going on in Europe. And the Germans, they want to expand eastward. They want to include Ukraine as a member of the European Union. The Germans are the leaders of the EU. despite what people may think about the French being this powerful people in the EU, the French are subordinate to the Germans. And Yanis Varoufakis makes this point quite clear in his book, Adults in the Room. The French are subordinate to the Germans. And the French are not as powerful as the Germans. The Germans are the most powerful nation in the EU. And so they're going to take advantage of this. And they're going to do what they want, and they're going to pursue their interests. And the Americans are simply just allowing this to happen. Now, at the same time, the Americans don't want the Germans to become allies to the Russians. But considering the fact that that the Germans did have an alliance with the Soviet Union, that actually may happen in the future just to spite the Americans. But if it does happen, I think it's going to be temporarily, because the Russians and the Germans have their own separate interests, and they're going to pursue those interests, and those interests are going to collide. They're going to conflict with each other. Another interesting thing that's happening with Poland. Poland is in tension with the Germans. There's a lot of tension in the air in between Poland and Germany, and a lot of this has to do with Poland's defiance against the EU's judiciary system. The EU is saying to Poland, you have to follow our judicial laws. You can't do whatever you want with your Supreme Court. And the Poles are telling the Germans, telling the EU really to go screw themselves. Years ago, there was this conflict that arose where the conservative Polish government wanted to get rid of its liberal judges. Basically, these liberal judges are just a product of the legacy of communism. They're liberals. We want to get rid of them. It's kind of like, if the Republicans were to look at Ruth Gator Ginsburg and say, that old hag, wish she was gone, and then she's gone, and we can now replace her with somebody that will give us a majority presence in the Supreme Court. Well, the Polish conservatives pretty much wanted to do the same thing. Get rid of all these liberal judges and replace them with conservative judges, replace them with the judges who are going to advance our political interests. And the Germans didn't like that, and the Germans told the Poles, you can't do that, and the Poles said, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. And the Poles basically said, okay, well, you owe us money, Germany. You owe us 1.4 trillion euros or dollars if you do the exchange rate because of all the damages that your people did to us during the Second World War. And the Poles, they factored in all of the deaths that the Germans caused. They factored in all the property damage, stolen property, and it really all amounted to over $1 trillion. And Poland said, well, you owe us money, Germany, and they're just trolling the hell out of these Germans. That's actually kind of entertaining and funny to watch. But there is this big rift going on between the Germans and the Poles, and I wouldn't be surprised to see in the news one day Germany invading Poland yet again. The Germans want to rise up as a power. Despite that average Germans may not want this, or a lot of average Germans may not want this, the German government is going to work to change this. They're going to work to change the consensus on this, and they're going to manufacture consensus, I believe. I think that's the reason why the Americans want this war to continue on. The Americans don't want this war to end tomorrow. They want this war to continue on as long as it can. And Zelensky may want to end this conflict by making a compromise with the Russians, but the Americans do not want that to happen. They want this conflict to continue as long as it can, because as long as this war exists, the Germans have an incentive to boost up the Bundeswehr, to boost up their armed forces. The Ukrainian far right does not want Zelensky to make a compromise, and if Zelensky makes a compromise on the Donbass with the Russians and tells the Russians, well, you guys can have Luhansk and Donetsk, just don't take any more territory, I would not be surprised to read in the news that Zelensky has gotten on a plane and flown to England or flown to Germany, because Zelensky will be in danger of literally being lynch mobbed by the far right in Ukraine. And the far right made that very clear after Zelensky won the election, saying very, very emphatically, very vitriolically, that if Zelensky makes a compromise on any territory, not just the Donbass, but on any territory, we will hang him from a tree. And they made this very clear. So this war is going to go on for a while, and it's going to give it's giving the incentive to the Germans to rise up, and that's what the Americans want. They want to control the Germans, but at the same time, kind of they want to loosen up the leash enough to allow the Germans to become a regional power in Europe, because they want the Germans to deal with the Russians themselves, so that the Americans can have enough space to deal with the Chinese. They want to help the Japanese become a military superpower, and when that happens, the Americans are going to say, okay, Turkey, you're good. Japan, you're good. Germany, you're good. All right, let's sit back and relax and really just watch the whole world burn. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.